I never imagined that stepping back into my hometown would stir up this whirlwind of emotions. 5 years had passed since I had left, yet as the plane touched down, the familiar knots twisted in my stomach. "You have to be there," my mother's voice echoed in my mind. My sister Sarah's engagement dinner wasn't just another event. She was family, after all. As I drove through the streets lined with memories, I couldn't shake off the anxious energy building inside me. I knew everything would be different now. Time had a way of doing that. When I arrived at the venue, an unexpected chill ran down my spine. The restaurant's facade seemed achingly familiar. It took a moment before reality hit. It was my restaurant. How could they not tell me? Entering felt surreal. The staff were strangers now. And yet, every corner whispered stories of dreams I'd once nurtured here. Sarah spotted me first and rushed over, enveloping me in a hug that spoke of so much left unsaid. "Lisa, it's been too long," she murmured. Her eyes held a mixture of guilt and excitement. "You didn't think to mention where we'd be celebrating?" I asked softly, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "We didn't want to make you uncomfortable." As guests chatted and laughed around us, I felt like an outsider, peering into a life that no longer belonged to me. But then something shifted within me, a realization. This place was still part of who I am. With a newfound strength stirring inside, I decided that tonight would not be about past regrets, but embracing what comes next. The night wasn't just about Sarah's future, but reclaiming pieces of my own past. From the moment I could reach the kitchen countertop, I felt a spark that ignited my soul. A love for cooking. Yet in my home, where the walls whispered of prestige and legacy, such passions were mere distractions to be snuffed out. My family, the Mitchells, draped themselves in wealth and social standing like armor. Anything less than a pursuit worthy of our name was met with disdain. "Lisa, you have potential far beyond flour and sugar," my father would declare during one of his lectures at our dining table, his eyes barely lifting from the financial reports spread before him. Each word was like a pinprick against my skin. His belief in my potential wrapped tightly in dismissal of my dreams. I often found sanctuary in the kitchen, my refuge where flavors danced under my fingers and aromas filled the air. But even there, I heard their echoing judgments. My mother's voice was a delicate blend of impatience and concern. "Focus on your studies, Lisa. The world will remember a name like ours only if we make it great." In her eyes, greatness meant boardrooms and business deals, not recipes scribbled on tattered paper. Inside me raged a quiet storm, the struggle between their expectations and my desires. Every disapproving glance from relatives during family gatherings was another brick added to this wall built between us. I often wondered if they realized how heavy their dreams felt when placed upon someone else's shoulders. Yet through it all, there lingered an ember of hope within me, a stubborn determination to be true to myself, a voice that whispered late at night as I lay awake, imagining what could be if only. The kitchen became more than just a place. It was a vision of my freedom unfolding ingredient by ingredient. And slowly, amidst the din of expectations crashing around me, I began to understand what it meant to truly fight for what one loves. Growing up, I lived in the constant shadow of my siblings' so-called perfection. Heather and Ethan were paraded around like trophies, capturing everyone's admiration with their academic triumphs and sports accolades. Our mother was always quick to brag about them at family gatherings. her face lighting up with pride as she recounted yet another one of their victories. "Ethan scored the winning goal," she'd say, or "Heather's on the honor roll again." And there I'd stand, feeling invisible, as if I were merely a whisper in a room full of shouts. But what about me? I loved art and poetry, my passions, my refuge. Yet every drawing I poured my heart into, every verse I penned was met with a dismissive glance or an indifferent smile. "Why can't you be more like your siblings?" was the unspoken question that hung heavy in the air. My creative spirit felt like a stain on our family's pristine image. I remember one day vividly. We were sitting around the dinner table when my mother started her usual sermon on success and ambition. Ethan had just won another award for his science project. Heather was being recognized as Student of the Month at her school again. And Lisa, she paused momentarily, searching for something positive to say about me, but inevitably settling on a sigh before quickly shifting focus back to Ethan's latest achievement. In those moments, I felt so small, like my worth was measured solely by the grades and medals I never had. It hurt, a deep ache that settled into my bones. And I wondered, would anything I ever achieved in life be enough for her? As those thoughts simmered within me, I realized something profound. Perhaps it wasn't about measuring up to their standards at all. Maybe it was time for me to embrace who I truly am and find value in that, not in comparisons or misplaced expectations. The kitchen became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the chaos of my life and find solace amidst the clattering of pots and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. It was here that I met Elena, our housekeeper, though to me she was more like an unsung hero. I remember the first time I lingered by the doorway, watching her deft hands transform simple ingredients into something magical. "Come in," she urged with a gentle smile, noticing my curiosity. "Join me." I hesitated for a moment, as if stepping over that threshold meant entering a new world. And perhaps it did. The warmth that enveloped me was not just from the oven, but from Elena's genuine kindness. As days turned into weeks, I found myself spending more and more time there, escaping from the harshness of my reality outside those walls. Cooking with Eleanor wasn't just about following recipes. It was a dance, a conversation without words, where each movement held meaning, and each spice added spoke stories of comfort and love. I learned how to knead dough until it felt alive beneath my fingers, how to season food with intuition rather than precision. "Cooking is about feeling," Eleanor would say as she placed a hand on her heart. And slowly, through these quiet moments, shared over steaming pots and simmering sauces, I began to rediscover my own heartbeat. The kitchen was no longer just a room. It became a refuge, a place where pain was soothed by creativity and resilience brewed stronger than any coffee. Every dish we created together was a testament to survival, a silent rebellion against everything that sought to break me down. In nurturing this newfound passion for cooking, I wasn't just making meals, I was rebuilding pieces of myself one recipe at a time, laying down bricks of hope in an otherwise crumbling life. And with every completed dish, I felt a flicker of empowerment ignite within me. Little did I know then how much these moments would shape my future. From the moment I was little, I found solace in the kitchen. It was my sanctuary, where I could transform simple ingredients into warm memories and moments of joy. But to my father, the aroma of fresh bread or the sight of a simmering pot meant nothing. He saw only numbers and charts. He envisioned a successful businesswoman, not a chef. For years, I tried to balance his dreams and mine, like carrying a heavy tray that threatened to topple with every step. Lisa, he would say, his voice laced with authority. Business is where the future lies. You'll thank me one day. My heart sank each time those words fell from his lips. How could I make him see that my passion was not driven by profit margins, but by the art of creating? Yet every time I attempted to voice my dreams, he met them with dismissive laughter or an unyielding glare. Standing there in his office, surrounded by looming shelves of business textbooks and framed degrees, I felt small. You need to be practical, he'd insist, handing me brochures for business schools as if they were golden tickets to prosperity. But inside, a different fire burned. A quiet rebellion simmered under my skin each day at business school. Surrounded by peers who spoke in jargon that made my head spin while I daydreamed of recipes and flavors yet discovered, I often found myself wondering, when did my dreams become secondary? Why did it feel like betraying him meant finding myself? This battle between duty and desire was tearing me apart. Yet somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about culinary school. It was about reclaiming my right to choose my own path. Have you ever felt the thrill of living a double life, one where every secret added a layer to your true self? My time at Dartmouth wasn't just about textbooks and lectures. Beneath the surface of academia, I was crafting a world filled with culinary dreams and hidden passions. I stumbled upon this path on a brisk autumn afternoon, when a casual invitation from a classmate led me to an underground supper club. The idea ignited something in me, a fire that had been smoldering beneath my attempts at fitting into the conventional mold expected by my family. In their eyes, my college education was supposed to be my ticket to success, the kind they envisioned, not me. But I craved more than faceless lectures and late-night study sessions. I wanted something tangible, something I could create with my own two hands. And so, I began hosting clandestine dinner parties in the small kitchen of my off-campus apartment. Each weekend became a canvas for creativity, where flavors danced like secrets, whispered only to those who dared to savor them. These evenings were thrillingly intimate. Strangers became friends over shared courses, laughter echoing around us like music from another world. My dual existence didn't stop there. I enrolled in chef workshops held in tucked-away corners of the city every Saturday morning. The aroma of fresh herbs and sizzling garlic pulled me deeper into this hidden realm where passion met precision. In those moments, amidst the clatter of pots and pans, I found solace from the pressures outside, from expectations that weren't mine to bear. Yet every session reminded me of the fragile balance between what was real and what was concealed from those I loved. I knew that one day these worlds would collide. But until then, I embraced each secretive feast as both liberation and rebellion against a future scripted by others. The moment Chef Laurent Bisset took a bite of my dish, time seemed to stop. His reputation preceded him, known not only for his culinary genius, but also for his discerning palate that could make or break careers in an instant. I watched him intently as he savored each morsel, every second stretching into eternity. My heart pounded in my chest like a frantic drum, each beat echoing the years of struggle, rejection, and relentless pursuit of a dream that often felt just beyond my grasp. It had been a long journey to get here. With each chop and stir, with every dash of spice, I had poured not just ingredients, but pieces of my very soul into the dish before him. Memories of all the times I was told I wasn't good enough flashed through my mind. each harsh critique at culinary school, every dismissive glance from family who thought this was nothing but a foolish pursuit. But standing there in the shadow of one of New York's most revered chefs, none of that mattered. "This is exquisite," Chef Bisset declared finally, his voice calm yet reverberating with authority that commanded respect across the globe. I couldn't help but release a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Relief washed over me, mingling with disbelief. Could it be true? Was this really happening? He leaned forward slightly, capturing my gaze with eyes that seemed to see right down through to my core. "How would you like to join my team here in New York?" For a moment I was speechless, stunned by the enormity of what was being offered. The very same kitchen where culinary legends were born was now within my reach. A million thoughts raced through my mind, but one rose above them all. This was more than just an opportunity. It was validation, a recognition that all those years hadn't been in vain. I'd be honored, I finally managed to reply, my voice barely concealing the overwhelming gratitude and excitement. As I shook his hand, sealing the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities, I knew this was where everything changed. When I made the decision to drop out of my MBA program, I knew it would shatter the fragile illusion of harmony within my family. But what I didn't expect was the complete and utter silence that followed. "Lisa, how could you throw away your future like this?" The echo of my father's voice still haunts me. His words weren't just filled with disappointment. They were laced with something colder, something that felt like a finality. I remember sitting there, across the dining room table, trying to explain myself. My heart pounded against my chest as I searched for words that wouldn't come. I can't keep living a life that's not mine," I finally whispered, hoping they'd hear the desperation in my voice. But their faces remained impassive, a wall impenetrable by any emotion I could muster. That's when it hit me. My dreams, my needs had become irrelevant in the narrative they'd crafted for me. In that moment, silence enveloped us like an unwanted guest. It stretched on endlessly until it became suffocating. Each tick of the clock seemed to mock the void between us. Their silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a severing, a complete estrangement, cloaked in emotional emptiness. My parents turned away from me as if distancing themselves from a stranger caught in their midst. I walked out that night, feeling more alone than ever before, leaving behind everything I'd thought was solid ground. As I stepped into the brisk evening air, questions flooded my mind. Had I chosen wrong? Would they ever understand me? My heart told me one truth. I needed to find my own path, even if it meant walking it alone. And so began my journey into an uncertain future, the lonely sound of my footsteps following me down a dimly lit street. There was a time when each day felt like a mountain I had to climb, with no summit in sight. From the moment I stepped into Laurent's world, I realized I was signing up for an experience that would test every fiber of my being. They said he was the best. Laurent, the man whose name alone evoked both awe and fear. But what they didn't say was how hard it truly was to endure his methods. Every morning began with grueling sessions that demanded more than just physical strength. They required a resilience I wasn't sure I possessed. "Again," Laurent would say, his voice steady and unyielding as stone. And so I'd push through another round, sweat pouring down my back, muscles screaming in silent protest. Would there ever be an end? Could this ever lead to something greater than just more pain? Yet beneath the surface of toughness he projected lay moments of insight, a wisdom earned from countless battles fought and won. He wasn't just teaching me skills, he was shaping a mindset. You have to want it more than anything else, he'd often remark, eyes piercing mine with intensity that made me question if he saw something in me I'd overlooked. I wanted to quit so many times, more than I'd care to admit. But there was something about the way Laurent believed in me that sparked a dormant flame within. With each trial, each moment of near defeat, turned recovery, I felt myself growing, not only in skill, but in spirit. Maybe this was Laurent's true gift, not just training warriors, but awakening strength hidden deep within. As days turned into months, the hardships we faced together became less daunting shadows and more like stepping stones, leading toward who I was meant to become. It dawned on me then, maybe climbing this mountain wasn't about reaching the top swiftly, but learning from each arduous step paved along the way. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the city was still asleep, I found myself pacing the cracked tiles of my tiny kitchen, lost in thoughts and dreams. A relentless voice inside me whispered about possibilities, about a life where my culinary visions weren't just fantasies, but tangible realities. But like many dreams born from solitude, mine felt as fragile as the peeling paint on my apartment walls. Then came that fateful afternoon. It was an ordinary day, dull light, filtering through grey clouds, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Lisa?" a confident voice asked. "I have an opportunity that might interest you." My heart skipped a beat. This was the call that would change everything. The investor's name was Michael, a man whose reputation for turning dreams into realities was known far and wide. He believed in my vision for Maison more than I dared to hope anyone ever could. "I've seen your work," he said during our first meeting over coffee, his eyes steady and sincere. "And I think you could do something extraordinary." The words sank in slowly, like water into dry earth. With Michael's backing, Maison wasn't just a glimmer of ambition anymore. It was alive. We opened its doors with me as the executive chef, every dish reflecting years of passion and struggle. There were nights when exhaustion clung to me like a second skin, but beneath it lay a new sense of purpose. Eventually, Michael's faith in me extended beyond those initial steps. He offered me ownership. Maison became mine, not just in name but in spirit, a testament to resilience and belief overcoming doubt. As I stood in the doorway of my own restaurant one evening, watching satisfied customers leave with smiles, I realized this wasn't just about owning a business. It was about reclaiming my narrative and proving that even from the depths of uncertainty, we can craft our destinies. I stood there, staring at the mirror, seeing the reflection of someone I barely recognize anymore. Behind the composed facade, my heart twisted in a complex symphony of fear and hope. This was my secret, a success I'd guarded fiercely from those who should have been my greatest supporters. But why hide it? Why keep quiet when every fiber of my being craved their recognition? It was simple. I wanted to be seen for who I truly was, not through the distorted lens of their expectations. Growing up in a family where achievements were either overlooked or commandeered for others' glory taught me one thing. My accomplishments often vanished into a collective pot, only to be served as another's triumph. The sting of watching my efforts go unnoticed left marks I couldn't erase easily. So, when success finally found me after years of tireless hard work, I chose to cradle it alone like a precious secret. "Are you coming to dinner tonight?" My mother's voice echoed over the phone, each syllable heavy with unspoken assumptions. For a fleeting second, I considered spilling everything, to break through the wall that had silently grown between us. But fear halted my tongue. "No," I replied softly. "I have work." It wasn't entirely a lie. My latest project demanded attention. Yet deep down, it was more than just work. It was freedom, validation on my own terms. Inside me battled two opposing forces: the child yearning for family approval, and the adult desperate for independence from their shadows. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, this duality weighed heavily on me. It whispered doubts in quiet moments, but also fueled determination during long nights. Each step forward solidified my resolve to redefine what recognition meant. On my terms, with boundaries drawn by respect rather than obligation. And while they remained oblivious to this chapter of my life, I could sense an approaching storm where secrets would clash with truths yet to be revealed. There it was, staring back at me, an invitation from Heather. My sister, whose mere presence in my mind used to ripple through with a stinging bitterness I tried so hard to hide. A dinner invitation, simply put. But beneath the ink and paper lay years of unspoken grievances and wounds that had yet to heal. It wasn't long ago that the thought of sitting across a table from her would have filled me with dread and defensiveness. Memories of whispered rumors, stolen opportunities, and spiteful looks flooded my mind. It would have been easy to tear up the invite, let it join the pile of unresolved tensions that had come to define us. Yet something within me, a small flicker of quiet strength I'd nurtured over time, urged me otherwise. I decided I would go, armed not with anger or resentment, but with the resolve to finally confront the shadow she cast over our shared history. The choice wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming my own narrative from the tapestry of our past. The night of the dinner approached faster than expected, and there I was at her doorstep, each breath measured, each step heavy yet determined. Inside, the setting was typical Heather, impeccable and meticulously designed as if perfection could patch over our imperfections. She greeted me with a smile that felt rehearsed, yet undeniably nervous. And in her eyes, a mirror reflecting back uncertainties she probably never knew how to voice. Sitting down at that table marked not just another meal together, but also the beginning of a confrontation long overdue. Not loud or accusatory, but rooted in truth and quiet courage. As I looked across at Heather, I knew this encounter was essential for unlocking chains I'd grown accustomed to carrying. I was ready to speak my truth. You know, sometimes the simplest acts can carry the weight of the world. As I stood outside the grand entrance, my heart pounded with a mix of anxious anticipation and calm resolve. Dressed in plain attire, my reflection was almost unrecognizable in comparison to the lavish surroundings that awaited me inside. Loose strands of hair framed a face that wasn't meant to stand out tonight. And that was precisely my plan. I took a deep breath and stepped through the doors. "Keep it together," I whispered to myself as I motioned subtly to my staff, who lingered discreetly at a distance. Their eyes met mine for a second, understanding the unspoken command. Under no circumstance should my true identity be revealed tonight. My mind raced with thoughts of why this charade was necessary. But then, memories flooded back. Reminders of past gatherings where status overshadowed sincerity, where whispers were louder than any genuine words spoken aloud. tonight, I didn't want admiration for wealth or power. I craved something real. As I moved through the room, filled with glittering gowns and tailored suits, there was an unexpected comfort in being just another face in the crowd. For years, I'd played roles crafted by expectation: daughter, heiress, host. But now I could simply observe without pretense. Yet beneath my calm exterior lay an underlying tension. What secrets would tonight unveil? Would anyone see through this deliberately crafted guise? Every interaction felt loaded with potential discoveries. Each stranger's glance a question mark hanging between curiosity and recognition. As I navigated through conversations and clinking glasses, one fact became increasingly clear. Sometimes power rests not in being seen, but in silently watching from within. And tonight, hidden revenge took form not in vengeance, but in reclaiming control on my own terms. Sometimes, the weight of secrets is heavier than any treasure. I stood in the back of the grand dining hall, heart pounding in my chest like a drum echoing through an empty chamber. The room was filled with opulence, adorned with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors that gleamed under the soft glow of ambient lighting. At the head of the table sat my family, prestigious, unaware, and proud. Each member was engaged in animated conversation, their laughter rippling through the air like a melody composed of wealth and privilege. My mother's eyes sparkled as she spoke about upcoming charity events. My father shared stories of his latest business conquests, his voice filled with the arrogance of a man who believes he holds the world in his palm. But they didn't know. Not one of them knew that Maison, the luxurious retreat they praised for its exclusivity and grandeur, belonged to me. It was my creation, my sanctuary, born from years of determination and countless nights spent wrestling with doubt and despair. I watched them celebrate their ignorance, a secret smile playing on my lips like a shadow in the moonlight. My mind drifted back to when this journey began, a time when I was merely an overlooked silhouette in their expansive world. Back then, even my dreams felt too small to acknowledge. They have no idea, I thought, feeling a strange mix of triumph and solitude mingling within me. Each word they spoke seemed to fuel a fire I had kept banked deep inside, a fiery resolve to step out from their shadows. And so I stood there, invisible yet powerful in my own right. Soon enough, they had learned whose hands truly shaped Maison's destiny. But for now, I relished this quiet victory alone, a silent testament to what lay just beneath the surface of their understanding. As I turned away from their oblivious smiles, a new chapter waited on the horizon, one where I would no longer be hidden, but recognized for all that I'd accomplished. It was a moment that should have felt welcoming, perhaps even familial. Instead, I stood on the threshold of their world, feeling like an uninvited guest in my own life story. As I crossed the room, their eyes met mine with forced smiles plastered on their faces. Greetings masked in superficial courtesy. "Nice to finally meet you," they said. But the words felt hollow, as if echoing through an empty cavern. I could feel their gaze traveling over me, like icy fingers assessing every flaw and imperfection. My clothes suddenly seemed too informal, my demeanor not quite what they expected. In that cold scrutiny, I realized I was being measured against some invisible standard of theirs, one that I had never agreed to nor understood. Inside my head, thoughts collided in chaos. Am I not good enough? Is there something about me that screams outcast? I tried to quell these inner voices with reason, This was nothing more than a first impression. Maybe things would improve. Their questions were polite, but pointed. Each inquiry a veiled critique of my life choices. What do you do? Oh, interesting, they'd say, with a tone that suggested they thought otherwise. It was as if my very existence needed justification in their eyes. I felt a tightening in my chest, familiar, yet unwelcome. The sting of judgment from those who had no right to hold power over my self-worth. Yet even amid this silent battle within myself, I sensed something else stirring beneath the surface. A voice rose inside me, quiet yet resolute. I am more than your assumptions. It whispered strength into my bones, reminding me of all I'd overcome to stand here now. With this realization swelling within me like a tide refusing to be turned back by mere disapproval, I knew this encounter was just the beginning. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a dinner that celebrated our engagement and symbolized the merging of two families. But as I sat at the table surrounded by the opulent trappings of my parents' home, a cold realization gripped me. This wasn't about love, at least not to them. Bradley sat across from me, the dim lighting casting sharp shadows on his face. He spoke with an air of nonchalance, his words carefully curated to impress rather than connect. Yes, he said, leaning back in his chair. I graduated top of my class at Harvard Law. Then came the clerkship at the Supreme Court. His voice dripped with practiced confidence. My parents listened with rapt attention, their eyes twinkling with satisfaction. They had always valued achievement over affection, status over sincerity. And here was Bradley, ticking every box on their unwritten checklist. I felt like an outsider at my own celebration. I had hoped for warmth, for a conversation that might reveal deeper connections or shared dreams. But instead, it felt like I was witnessing a strategic negotiation. As Bradley continued to elaborate on his illustrious career path, I couldn't help but feel a knot tightening in my stomach. Where were the stories about us? The memories that made our relationship special? Inside, my mind raced with questions I didn't dare voice aloud. Is this who he truly is? Or has he simply become another figure in my parents' tapestry of success? The laughter around the table seemed distant and hollow. With each word Bradley spoke, I saw less of the man I'd fallen in love with, and more of someone performing for approval. A mirror reflecting everything my family revered. A part of me longed to reach out and break through this facade we'd all constructed so carefully. To find out if beneath those impressive accolades lay a heart as vulnerable and yearning as my own. But that night was not for such revelations. Not yet. Instead, I smiled dutifully and played my role as the happy bride-to-be while inside. Something shifted. A quiet resolve forming amid the cacophony of prideful accolades surrounding me. As I stood in the dimly lit corner, a quiet observer of my own creation, the scene played out like some kind of twisted movie. My family sat around the dining table, illuminated by the soft glow of candles flickering gently against the twilight. The room was steeped in an atmosphere that took weeks to perfect, each detail painstakingly chosen to craft a sense of warmth and belonging. Yet here I was, on the sidelines, invisible. It was as if I were peering through a window at strangers savoring a moment I had sculpted with love and care. "Doesn't it feel cozy here?" my sister remarked with a satisfied sigh, her voice cutting through my reverie. My mother nodded, eyes dancing with pleasure as she toasted to what she called our wonderful family. Every smile exchanged across that table felt like a sharp twist in my chest. a reminder that they basked in the ambiance without acknowledging its source. I longed for them to see me not just as another face among them, but as the architect of this cherished space. Yet, as they laughed over stories and sipped their wine, I remained unseen. Maybe next time they'll notice, I whispered to myself, clinging to the hope that maybe things would change. An unsettling silence filled the room despite their muted chatter. A silence born from my need to be recognized, appreciated not just as a daughter or sister, but as someone who contributed something valuable beyond measure. But within that silence came a realization, one that began to shift something deep inside me. Maybe it was time I started crafting not just spaces for others' happiness, but building paths toward my own recognition and peace. And so there it was, a spark igniting within me, fueled by desire and a newfound resolve. It was time for change. You know, there are moments in life that catch you off guard, revealing truths you never imagined needing to confront. That dinner reservation was supposed to be a simple gesture, a night out to celebrate us. Bradley had called me, his voice gleaming with pride as he said, "Guess what? I got us into that exclusive restaurant. You won't believe it." He chuckled, pausing before adding, "I pulled some strings through my connections." His words hung heavy in the air on the other end of the line. My heart sank ever so slightly, even as I tried to muster a response that matched his enthusiasm. "Wow, that's amazing," I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. Because the truth Bradley didn't know, what he assumed were his connections coming through, was actually me. I'd been the one behind the scenes, negotiating and pulling my own strings for weeks, just to secure that impossible reservation. It was meant to be a surprise, an act of love to show him how much he meant to me. Now here we were, tangled in a web spun from good intentions, but veiled truths. How could he not have known it was me? Had he ever truly seen the efforts I put into our relationship? Or was he always too busy basking in his own narrative of success? Doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest at our table, whispering questions and sowing seeds of resentment where there had been none before. I decided then and there that this wasn't just about a dinner reservation. It was about acknowledgement and respect. It was time for Bradley to see beyond his reflection and recognize who stood beside him. As I prepared to confront him about it over dinner, my resolve strengthened. Tonight wouldn't just be another evening out, it would be a turning point. The moment I walked into the dimly lit living room, a familiar unease settled in my stomach. It was supposed to be a casual family dinner, but I knew better. The air was thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. As I took my seat at the old oak table, I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for the right moment to pounce. "So, Lisa," my mother's voice broke the silence first, smooth yet laced with an edge of curiosity that made my skin crawl. "How's everything going with your career?" For a split second, my mind raced through all the possible answers I could give, none of which were entirely truthful. But how could they be? There was so much more beneath the surface than anyone in this room cared to understand. How do you explain the relentless pressures and silent battles without sounding defeated? Beneath their veneer of concern, I sensed something else. A hunger for stories of failure, perhaps. Or maybe just evidence that their doubts about me were justified. A part of me wanted to lay it all bare, to make them see me beyond their assumptions and judgments. But now wasn't the time. "It's going well?" I replied vaguely, forcing a smile that barely touched my eyes. I'm exploring some new opportunities. In truth, I was holding on by a thread, but admitting that felt like handing them ammunition. Their faces remained unreadable masks of politeness and vague interest. It felt like playing a high-stakes game where honesty was both a weapon and a vulnerability. I could almost hear my father's disapproving thoughts as he nodded slowly. Somewhere within his measured response was a hint of satisfaction, an affirmation that perhaps his skepticism about my choices had been right all along. But I couldn't let them break me down just yet. Not until I was ready to rebuild stronger walls around myself. It was supposed to be a joyful family gathering, the kind where laughter fills the room and stories weave through generations. Yet, as I stood in the kitchen, my heart pounded with anticipation, hoping this time would be different. Maybe this time I'd finally feel seen. There it was. My creation. A dish I had poured hours of my love and effort into. With trembling hands, I carried it to the dining table, trying to suppress the anxiety bubbling beneath my skin. It was Heather who first locked eyes on it, her expression unreadable, yet piercing. "What's this?" she asked, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Just something special for tonight," I replied softly, trying to mask the vulnerability in my voice. Heather's lips curled into a smirk. "Doesn't look all that appealing," she snapped. Her words sliced through me like shards of glass, each syllable a reminder of countless times I've felt invisible. As if on cue, the family joined in, echoing critiques that felt rehearsed over years of familial expectations and disappointments. "A little too much salt," someone commented. "Looks overcooked," another added casually between bites of other dishes. Inside my head, a storm raged, a cacophony of doubt and self-criticism I'd heard too many times before. Am I really that undeserving of praise? Does everything I touch turn to disappointment? I watched them dissect what they didn't know was mine, with practiced indifference. But inside, oh inside, it hurt. Still, amidst their laughter and unsolicited advice about culinary skills I'd never sought from them, an unexpected realization took root. They don't know it's mine because they never ask. They never see me beyond their preconceived notions of who I'm allowed to be in their narratives. And in that moment, in their ignorance, I found unexpected strength. Today might not be the day they recognize my worth, but maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would hold something different. Have you ever felt a silent scream echoing in your soul, one that no one around you could hear? That was me, standing there in the heart of what used to be my world, watching as the familiar walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with their oppressive silence. It wasn't the first time I had faced adversity, but this betrayal hit differently. It was personal. I watched them shuffle around with casual indifference, like dismantling someone's dreams was just another day at the office. Each piece of equipment packed away, each file carelessly tossed aside, felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But it wasn't just about me anymore. My thoughts turned to my staff, individuals who had poured their hearts and souls into this place alongside me. How could I explain this to them? How could I possibly shield them from the pain of seeing everything we built together reduced to nothing? The room was filled with murmurs of dismissive conversation, but all I heard was the pounding of my own heart. The weight of disappointment hung heavy in the air, thicker than fog on a winter morning. I stood there, rooted to the spot not by fear, but by an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Why didn't they see? Why couldn't they understand that this wasn't just brick and mortar? It was a sanctuary for dreams, a beacon for those seeking hope in their darkest moments. I struggled to keep my emotions at bay, forcing myself to breathe through the rising tide of despair. This wasn't just about a business, it was about people, my people. And I refused to let them become casualties of someone else's indifference. In that moment, amid the chaos and clatter of dismantling my life's work, I made a silent vow. No matter how hard they tried to erase what we had built here, they couldn't strip us of our spirit or our perseverance. And so began my fight, not just for what was lost, but for what still remained. You know, it's funny how life's biggest moments can sometimes be used as a smokescreen. I found myself drowning in the whirlwind of planning Heather's wedding, using every detail to escape the suffocating air of criticism that hovered around me like a dark cloud. From choosing the perfect shade of mauve for her bridesmaids to deciding on floral arrangements and seating charts, I poured myself into the distractions. But beneath this facade of busy excitement, there was an undercurrent of tension that never seemed to leave my side. Each conversation seemed to veer off course into treacherous waters. "Are you sure about that choice?" someone would say with an oh-so-subtle lift of their brow. "I imagined you'd have better taste," another would mutter, just loud enough for me to hear. Their words were like tiny darts, aimed with precision, leaving small but painful marks on my heart. In those moments, I'd inwardly shrink, desperately hoping no one noticed the cracks forming in my composure. Why was I their constant target? What had I done to deserve this unending scrutiny? Heather's happiness was my anchor. Her joy became the mask that shielded me from facing my own turmoil. But even as I orchestrated her engagement party and watched her glow with anticipation, a voice inside whispered, "How long can you keep running from this?" Every time I heard those passive-aggressive comments, I felt an urge rising within me, a quiet yet powerful determination not to let them break me. So while the world congratulated Heather on her beautiful journey ahead, I stood quietly beside her, silently battling demons they couldn't see, preparing myself for a moment when I'd finally turn and face them head on. You ever have one of those days when you just want to escape reality, even if it's just for a moment? I walked into that restaurant hoping for a brief respite from my chaotic life. The kind of place where the ambiance wraps around you like a comforting hug, and the flavors momentarily transport you to a different world. But as soon as I stepped in, there she was, Heather, the last person I wanted to see. Heather's presence was like an unwelcome storm cloud, darkening my fragile sense of peace. She caught my eye almost immediately, her lips curving into the all-too-familiar smirk. "Lisa," she called out, her voice dripping with a mockery she didn't bother to conceal. "Fancy seeing you here." I forced a smile and nodded, my mind racing with internal pleas for strength. Why did it have to be today? Couldn't I just enjoy one meal without her judgment looming over me? Heather sauntered over, eyes glinting with mischief. "Didn't expect to see someone like you here," she taunted, as her gaze flickered over my outfit appraisingly. The air felt heavy, each second stretching uncomfortably between us. It was as if she knew exactly how to poke at the delicate fabric of my self-worth until it unraveled completely. "How do you even manage to afford this place?" Heather continued, laughter barely restrained. A bitter taste rose in my throat as I struggled to maintain composure. Her words echoed in my mind long after they were spoken, stoking the embers of shame and resentment. But then something shifted within me. a realization that perhaps this was my chance to reclaim power over my own narrative. Her words no longer had to define me. They didn't control what I valued or how I wanted to live. As I stood there, heart pounding against the cage of my chest, I knew this confrontation was far from over. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere seemed almost perfect. I was surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, a world that felt miles away from my usual concerns. But as the night began to wind down and the waiter placed the bill gently on our table, I noticed Bradley's demeanor shift instantly. His face, once relaxed and jovial, turned a shade paler, his brow furrowed with an intensity that could slice through stone. I watched him pick up the bill, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he examined it with laser-like focus. It was as if time had slowed down, each tick of the clock echoing louder in my ears. My heart skipped a beat as I sensed something amiss, an unsettling knot forming in my stomach. "Where's the charge for the main course?" Bradley muttered under his breath, barely audible but tinged with a sharp edge of panic. He scanned the itemized list repeatedly, each glance revealing nothing new but deepening his growing anxiety. For a moment, I held my breath, hoping perhaps it was just a small oversight, a simple mistake that would be easily corrected. Yet, when he looked up at me, there was no mistaking the alarm in his eyes. "They forgot to charge us for the most expensive dish," he whispered, urgently. His voice carried a mix of disbelief and apprehension that mirrored the turmoil churning inside me. The thought of alerting someone about this error felt like standing at a precipice, uncertain whether correcting it would lead to relief or uncover further trouble. Without hesitating further, Bradley flagged down our server. "Excuse me," he began with feigned calmness hiding underlying tension. "It seems there's been an error on our bill." In that moment, a small yet significant power shift occurred, where accountability weighed heavily against convenience's allure. Have you ever been blindsided by a truth that shattered your perception of reality? That was my night, sitting in the dim glow of an upscale restaurant, a place where every detail seemed to whisper elegance and exclusivity. The clink of cutlery and muted conversations filled the air, a familiar symphony that somehow felt foreign to me. I had come here intending to indulge in some quiet self-reflection, a small rebellion against the chaos my life had become. As I sat there, stirring my wine absent-mindedly, memories of happier times threatened to surface, but I pushed them down with practiced ease. Tonight was about moving forward, not looking back. I ordered dinner, more out of obligation to the formality than hunger, each dish a reminder of nights spent in company that no longer belonged to me. When the waiter approached with that knowing smile, my heartbeat quickened. "Enjoying your meal, Miss Dara?" he asked politely. His voice held a familiarity that caught me off guard. I nodded hesitantly. "It's wonderful," I replied, trying to mask any surprise. He leaned closer as if letting me in on a secret only he knew. "Your dinner has already been covered," he said softly, but clearly enough for it to resonate through the noise around us. My mind raced. Who would do such a thing? And why? "Welcome back, Miss Dara," he added with a nod so slight it seemed almost conspiratorial. The words hung in the air between us, like an echo from another life, the life I thought I'd left behind. I sat there stunned, realizing someone had anticipated my return before even I did. A mix of emotions surged within me, curiosity intertwined with anxiety and anger tempered by gratitude. As confusion slowly transformed into resolution, one thing became clear. I needed answers. And just like that, what started as a quiet dinner turned into the first step toward reclaiming my narrative. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on me. It was as if the world had paused, waiting for my next words to shatter the silence that hung thickly between us. My family, my own flesh and blood, who'd always seen me as the quiet, compliant daughter, had no idea what I was about to unveil. I have something important to tell you. My voice quivered slightly at first, then grew steady with each word. My son, you know, the company you've all been talking about? I paused, drawing in a breath for courage. I own it. It's mine. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Faces once animated by casual conversation now froze mid-expression. Eyes widened in disbelief, mouths slightly agape as they struggled to process this new reality. The shock was palpable. My brother was the first to break the silence. What do you mean you own it? How could you... How did you even... He stammered, his bravado crumbling into confused humility. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness rising within me. A bittersweet cocktail of emotions that boiled over into words before I could stop them. Did any of you ever wonder what I was doing while you dismissed me as just Lisa? Did you think those years abroad were for nothing? Every late night, spent burning through numbers and ideas, building something real. It wasn't just a hobby. As their minds wrestled with this turn of events, I saw their perceptions shifting like tectonic plates under the pressure of truth finally out in the open. Maison is mine, I repeated softly, yet firmly, feeling a newfound strength surging through my veins. In that moment, their incredulous faces mirrored all those years of being underestimated and overlooked. And just like that, the power dynamics shifted entirely in my favor. They say life's a journey, but they rarely warn you about the shadows that accompany each step. My path began shrouded in darkness, where every obstacle felt like an insurmountable wall. I remember nights spent wrestling with doubt, questioning if the dreams I held so close to my heart would ever see the light of day. In those early days, support was scarce. The ones I thought would stand by me were silent, distant even. Their indifference was a constant reminder that I was on my own. I often wondered why my struggles seemed invisible to them. Was it because they saw no value in my potential? Or did they only hold faith in what they could already see? I poured my soul into every effort, fueled by a fire that refused to be extinguished by neglect or disbelief. Each small victory felt monumental, an affirmation that I was moving forward despite the odds stacked against me. But with every advancement came a new challenge. And with each challenge, the realization grew clearer. I had to be my own advocate in a world that turned its back on me. But then, success came knocking, unexpectedly yet deservedly, and suddenly everything changed. Those who once ignored my plight now sang praises as if they'd been there all along. It was both validating and infuriating. The bitter irony of recognition after the fact. I stood before them, triumphantly aware of their hypocrisy. They cared now, because success shines a light too bright to ignore. "Oh, how proud we are," they exclaimed, but their words rang hollow against the echo of past silence. In calling out their belated admiration, I reclaimed my narrative, reminded myself and them of one truth. My journey from struggle to triumph wasn't theirs to celebrate without acknowledging the shadows they chose not to dispel. Standing there, I realized something crucial. There was no more room for me to seek approval from those who would never give it. I had spent so much of my life longing for acknowledgement, validation that never came. But now the silence was deafening, and in that void, I found my voice. It was time to seize back control. When Heather asked me to host her wedding dinner, it felt like a crossroads. One path led to old patterns of people-pleasing and self-neglect, and the other, liberation. I looked at Heather and saw both my sister and a reminder of all the times I'd put myself second. But this time would be different. "I will host your wedding dinner," I told her firmly, meeting her gaze with newfound determination. "But it will be on my terms." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking through her usual composure. And in that moment, I could sense the shift, not just in her perception, but in the universe around us. Inside, a storm of emotions swirled. Fear mingled with hope, apprehension interwoven with courage. Yet above all, there was an unyielding resolve that grounded me. I thought about all those moments when I'd compromised who I was to fit into someone else's narrative. But now I was penning my own story. A story where my needs mattered as much as anyone else's. As Heather nodded slowly, acceptance dawning in her eyes, a warmth spread through me. This decision wasn't just about hosting a dinner. It symbolized reclaiming my space, my worth. With this simple act of assertion, I felt the chains of doubt fall away. Hosting this dinner wasn't about gaining their affection. It was about honoring myself. And so began the next chapter, not defined by others' expectations, but by my own terms.